Greetings from this side. Welcome to another episode of my Python tutorial series. My name is Eliazar and you are watching EA Lego Academy. Now, it's been a while since I posted videos, so I've been very busy and had a lot of things to do. But we're back again with full steam. Now, to pick up from where we left off, in our last tutorial video, we looked at perfecting our banking system, and we are still going to see how we can even improve further on the whole application later on when we look at um, structured query language. So when we look at SQL, we are going to see how we can be able to perfect and even take our banking system a step or a notch higher. But today's tutorial episode is going to be centered around building a basic text editor. So we're going to start with creating a text editor. Now, the text editor is not going to be overly complex. So it's not going to be complex. It's going to be basic. It's going to have most of the most important features that Notepad has. So I'm going to build it to have features similar to that of Notepad. So without further ado, let's just get started. So I take it that we have our PyCharm already installed on our operating system. So this is just a continuation from our videos, from what we did. Okay, so this was where we stopped in the last tutorial video where I improved upon the banking system. So I want to start create a new Python file so that we can tackle today's project. So I will just come here. So I'm assuming that you already have PyCharm already installed. Of course, you have the interpreter already installed. So if you have neither of these installed on your system, do well to go back to my previous videos and watch the first tutorial. So the first tutorial I did on this in this tutorial series centered around getting the Python interpreter installed on your operating system and the PyCharm integrated development environment also installed. So without wasting much time, I will just come here, right click, come here to new, click on Python file and start coding away. So I will just come here and I would call it low budget notepad. So low budget because it doesn't have all the features that notepad has. So I've already opened up notepad by the side so that we can do a comparison side by side. So it's going to be very basic, very straight to the point, although it's going to be code intensive. So what I would do, I would just split them side by side in comparison with each other so that we can be seeing the progress of what we are trying to do. Okay, so now the first thing I want to do, because I'm building this as a graphical user interface, we already know. So the first thing I'm trying to do, let me open up a blank um, screen for my notepad. So the first thing I'm trying to do is to import tkinter. So this is the library that allows us to be able to create graphical user interfaces. This is not the first video on tkinter. This is not the first video of me explaining what it's all about. So if you want to have proper understanding, this tutorial series works or progresses in some series of steps or progresses in steps. So I didn't just jump here to start using tkinter. There were videos that led up to this video showing you how you can get started with tkinter from its inception, that is from creating the first GUI or understanding what a GUI means to placing widgets on that GUI, and then to performing more complex processes or more complex things with that addition of your widgets on the GUI. So the GUI is made up of a window screen and widgets. So together, the window screen and widgets are called graphical user interfaces. So not to talk too much, I will just come here and say from just okay. So you import tkinter, then you come down here and say import, or you can just come here and say from tkinter import file dialog. So if you can remember, we have used this file dialog before in previous tutorials. So the file dialog allows us to be able to access files on our operating system. Now I'm going to take an object-oriented approach. So I'll come here and create a class, and I will call it low budget notepad. So the same name as the file. So low budget notepad. So I hope I can be fast with this project. Now I'll come here and I'll create the main window so that it can display the text widget with the background. So I'll come here and say window to tkinter.tk. Sorry, what am I doing? Yeah, tkinter.tk. Okay, and I'll come here and say window dot title. So low budget pad. Come here, say window dot geometry. I'll just give it 500 by 400, so that will be the size. And after that, I will create my initializer. And what I will do, I will just say scroll. So I'll create my scroll bar, the the one that scrolls vertically and then the one that scrolls horizontally. So I will say scroll bar. So scroll bar, um, scroll bar, should I create it here or not? Okay, so scroll bar. So it is going to be on this window screen. So I'll say window, self dot window has an orient. So an orientation is going to be, I'll just come here to the next line. So I'm sure we are already familiar with all these things I'm doing, but don't worry, I will still explain. What I'm doing here is that I'm creating a scroll bar that will allow me to scroll vertically. So you notice that in Notepad, as you start to type and you go to a new line, you discover that at some point a vertical scroll bar appears so that you can scroll vertically. You can see that. So that is precisely what I'm trying to do. And also in your as you scroll, so it has been set to wrap around anyway, so it doesn't allow us to enter the screen. But you notice that in your PyCharm, if you write code that extends above your view, you will notice that a horizontal scroll bar appears at the bottom side, allowing you to be able to scroll. Okay, so it's not responding. Okay, so a horizontal scroll bar appears, allowing you to scroll. So you see that you can scroll. So that is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to create both the vertical and the horizontal. So I'll come here and I'll create another one. I'll call it scroll X for the vertical. tkinter dot scroll bar. Scroll bar. Then I'll come here. So now there are some things I'm trying to do. There are some things I'm trying to do. This scroll bar is not on my window screen. It's not. It's actually on a frame. So I will come here and create a frame. I'll just call it frame 1 is equal to tkinter. Now why it started to act up. So tkinter of frame then window. It's on the window screen. So I'll come here and see frame one, self.frame one. Of course, when you are inside your initializer, you can't just, I think I need to close some programs because my system has started to lag. It does not lag at all. It doesn't lag. I wonder why it's doing that for the first time. A bit, you have to slow down this project and you have to cause a lot of issues here. I don't know why it's lagging. It's lag. Just a minute. Trying to close the projects I've already opened up. Wow. So let's hope that it will be faster. So I'll come here and say self.frame frame one. So that is for the first frame, and I'll create another frame. To save myself the stress, I'll just copy this guy and paste it. Now change it to frame two. So why am I doing this? Now, if you look at this very well, if you look at your notepad this side, you will discover that this vertical scroll bar is on the same frame with the text widget that occupies here. So it's on the same frame. Now there's another frame at the bottom that the horizontal scroll bar will occupy. So that's why I'm creating a second frame for that horizontal scroll bar. I'm sure we get the logic. So I'll come here and say self.frame two. And of course, you already know that when I say self means self refers to that class. So it's telling you that the frame belongs to that class. Now come here and I'll say orient. I'll say tkinter dot horizontal. Let me just adjust this guy back like this. Okay, so that is basically what I'm trying to do. Now I'll create a function to run my code. So I'll just call it screen. That's it. So screen. I'll come here. So I'll just create a text widget. I'll say tkinter.text. Now the text widget is going to be on my self.frame one, obviously, and I'm going to give it a width. So I'll make it wide. I'll give it maybe 30, width of 30, and the height of, let's say, 10. I'll give it a font of Arial 30. Now come here and I'll say text dot pack. Now I'll say side is equal to tkinter dot left. So I'm packing it at the left because I want it to be at this side and I want to pack this scroll bar at the left to beside it. That's what I'm trying to do. And I'll say expand equal to tkinter dot yes. Now say fill equal to tkinter dot quotes. Okay, and after that I'll come here. Now because I'm trying to attach the scroll bar, the vertical scroll bar, to my text, to the widget, I'll just come here and I will say y scroll command is equal to myself. So you have to say self. Okay, so I didn't do this properly. I'll come here and say self dot scroll y, and I'll come here and I'll say self dot scroll x. Okay, so after that I'll come here and say self dot scroll y dot set. So dot set. So this allows me to attach the scroll bar to the text widget. Now also come here and say x scroll command is equal to self dot scroll x set. In that lovely. So after that, so I have created my text widget. I've attached the scroll bar widget to it. Now I want to now ensure that the scroll bar widget can be vertically and horizontally scrollable. That's what I want to do. Now, in order for me to do that, I'll come here and say self dot scroll y. Then in parentheses, I'll come here and say command. Sorry, scroll y dot config. I'll forget that. So dot config a command is equal to now. Now say text. You have to call the widget that you want to apply the scroll bar to. Click dot y view. Y view. Then you do the same thing. You do likewise. You say self dot scroll x. And you say dot config as well. Then come here. You say command text dot x view. So now this just allows me to attach the scroll bars to my widget. So after that, after I have attached them and I have packed my widgets, the next thing I'm going to do is to pack the scroll bar for the y-axis beside my text widget. So I will just come here and say self dot scroll y dot pack. I'll come here and I'll say side is equal to tkinter. So tkinter dot left. Now come here. Now say fill. So fill equal to tkinter dot y. It's going to fill the entire y-axis. I'll come here and I'll say expand is equal to tkinter dot yes. So that as I increase the window screen, it expands also. And I will do the same thing for my scroll X. I'll come here and say pack. And I will say side is equal to, so it doesn't have any side because it is directly under the frame one. So but before all these I will need to come here. I will need to pack my frame one and frame two. So I'll say now because again they are inside my class, I have to say self dot frame one dot pack. You might notice I'm packing them at the top. So why am I doing this? So that the frames will be packed first before I place the widgets on the frame. That is the reason why I'm carrying this out first. So self dot frame one dot pack. Then I'll come here and I'll say side. So there's no need for side since it's going to be stacked, or they are going to be stacked on top of themselves. So I will just come here and say fill is equal to tkinter dot both. So it's going to fill both sides. And I'll say expand is equal to tkinter dot yes. I'll say self dot frame two dot pack. So I don't want, so I'll say fill is equal to tkinter dot x. So this one is going to fill the x axis. Now come here and I'll say expand is equal to tkinter dot yes. So that when I increase the window screen, it increases as well. But we don't even need this as the funnest part. I don't need this. And also for the scroll X, all I need to just say is fill equal to tkinter dot x again. That's it. So I have attached them to the frame one and frame two, and I've packed the frame one. So all I have to do is to call the main loop here. So I'll say self.window.main loop, self.window. So you always use self every time you are inside that class. So all I will have to do is to just say lb notepad. Notepad is equal to budget notepad. Now come down here and say lb notepad screen. Let's test it and see what we have. Okay, let's check it out properly. Okay, so it's not supposed to be expanding like this. We're almost there. We're almost there. Just hold on. We are going to adjust the size. So what I will do, I'll just increase the width a bit. I'll give it 800, and I'll give this one 600. Then, because I don't want my scroll bar to be expanding, which is very bad. I will just say um, fill. That's all. Give it fill. Let's test it out again. So you can see that even though I increase the size, it just maintains. It just attaches itself to the notepad like that. So it just attaches itself. Well, we're still going to add a menu widget so that we can choose just like we have here. So the only thing I will add is just I might add the edit, but what I'm going to focus on is just to open a file, save a file, then save as. So I might not do save as, but I will definitely do exit. I will do save. I will do open, and I will also show you how you can say Control S as well to be able to save. So these are the things I'm going to work with because if I decide to add more options, the video will be longer than what I have already budgeted, the time I have already budgeted for the video. So I'll just do a few of them. Now, there's something that happens every time I type a text and I get to the end of my text editor, you discover that it automatically goes to the next line. So this is because the wrap, there is a default attribute passed to the text widget that allows your text to wrap around the screen, not to enter into the screen. So in order for you to simulate something like this, whereby if you type text, your pie chart and it enters the screen, it just extends like that so that it can activate the horizontal scroll bar. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to activate this guy. That's what we're trying to do, trying to activate. So let us see. Let me just show you. So I should type now. It can't even be activated because I have not done that. But let me just show you the vertical scroll bar first. You'll notice that as I go to a new line, this vertical scroll bar automatically gets activated, and I can be able to scroll to see my other text at the top. Yeah, so that is one of the things taken care of already. Now the next thing that we are trying to address here is the wrap concept. Now inside my text widget, I'll just come here and I'll just write wrap and I'll give it a value of none. So none is a constant in the tkinter module that allows us to remove the wrap of our text so that when I write text and it hits the other end of the screen, instead of wrapping around and going to the next line, it does what? It immediately enters into the screen so that the horizontal scroll bar can be activated. So that is what we're trying to do. So let's test it. Type, you discover that enters into the screen, and what happens? My horizontal scroll bar becomes activated. So this is just your classical notepad, similar to what we get in our pie chart as you are typing text. All right, so let's take it a notch further. So now I'm trying to create a menu widgets, so that we can simulate exactly what we have here in our notepad. Like I told you, I'm only going to create the file menu, and I'm only going to create for open, save, exit, and save Control S. That is, I will now introduce the use of binding functions, which we have already treated. So, like I said, most all my projects, they build upon already learned concepts. So I don't just pull things out of the air. If you have been following my tutorial series, I build upon concepts that I have already taught in my previous tutorial video. So if you really want to master most of the concepts I'm saying, you will just do yourself a favor by following my videos and taking notes. All right, so I'll come down here and I'll say menu bar. Of course, I'm trying to replicate this background. So this background where these menus are placed on is referred to as my menu bar. So it's also a menu that contains other menus on it. So I'll say menu bar is equal to tkinter dot menu. So I have already explained this thing before when we So I've explained it before when we looked at the menu widget. So you can go back to my previous videos to do a refresher. So menu bar, so self.window. So after this, I want to now create my file menu. So I'll just come here and say file is equal to tkinter dot menu. So my file menu is on my menu bar. So it's going to use my menu bar as a background. Now it's going to have a tear off. So tear off is an option that allows you to remove dotted lines. So the equivalent of what allowed us to remove dotted lines before this new tab, that is what this tear off does for us. So that is what it does. And after that, I can now come here and add it to the menu bar. So I'll say add cascade, add cascade. So it's just similar to the fact that until you use a geometry manager for a widget, that widget can't be seen on a window screen. So these are the concepts I'm going to apply here. So I will just come here and say label. So label, I'll just give it a text of file, and I'll come here and say menu, menu, and I'll say file. So what is happening here is this. I'm adding this my file to my menu bar. So it is this menu. This menu acts like my geometry manager to make it visible on the menu bar. So this is my menu bar. I want to make the file visible, so I have to use the menu, this menu attribute to, and I have to assign the file menu as its argument. Okay. So the next thing that I'm trying to do here is to start adding functionality to my file. Now you can also embed a menu widget inside another menu widget. So I'll just quickly do that. I might just add a recent menu so that I can demonstrate that concept. So let me quickly do that. After my file, I will just say recent so that I can embed it inside my file menu widget. So I'll come here and say tkinter dot menu. So it's also a menu, but this time around it is on my file menu. Then it also have a tear off, of course, equal to 0 because it's a menu inside my menu. But let me add some commands first. I'll say add command. Now the first command I'm going to add, I'll say label. It's going to be open. This would allow me to open up a file when I click on it. We'll do all that. So, but first of all, I will give it a command of none. Then I'm going to add another command. Now this will also be a label, and I'll give it value of save. Give it a command of none also. We're going to come back here and address all of them. That's what we're going to do. But let's just finish all this. So I will also give a specification beside it and say control plus S so that you can save. So I'm going to attach a binding function to it. Now I'll come here and I'll say file dot add separator, which allows us to draw a straight line. And I'll come here and say file dot add command. I'm going to exit the code. I will say label exit. So I'll say command. I'll use my lambda this time around. And I'll say self dot window dot destroy. So the destroy function allows us to close that window screen. Now this my recent, I want to add it to my file. So I'm going to add it at this point. I'll come here. I will say file dot add cascade. So we use add cascade every time we are trying to add a menu to a menu. So file is a menu, and I'm trying to add another menu called recent. I'll just come here and say label. I will give it a value of recent, and I'll come here, and in order for it to be displaying on my file menu, I'll come here and I'll say menu, and I'll say recent. That is it. And after that, I can now start adding just random things to my recent just to show you that it works. So I'll come here and say add command. I'll just say label. I'll just call it, I'll say Python project that reflects the first recent thing I have. I will not give it any command. I'll say none. I don't want to make it overly complex than already it is. I don't want to make it more complex than it is going to be. And I'll just come here again and say add command, say label, and I'll just say Java project, and I'll just say command none. I'll come here, I'll say recent, but add command, and so I'll say label, I'll just say Django project, give it command of none. So let us see, let's test our, so we're not going to test it yet. We have to make sure that it is visible on my Windows screen. Now, in order to make everything visible, I'll just come here and say self.window.fig. I'll come here and I'll say menu equal to menu bar. Everything will now be fully visible. So I've not added commands yet to do the open, save, or to do the exit. So we have done the exit already, rather. So all I have to do is the open and then the save. So I'll just run. So you notice that at the top of my notepad, I have the menu widget. If I click on that, you see my open, save, Control S, the recent. When you click on the recent, you see that it takes you to other options to choose from. Then when I click on exit, you see that it closes my window screen. All right, so we're making progress. So I want to create a function that allows me to be able to perform all these operations like open, save, and the likes. So the first thing I want to do, so we're going to apply our knowledge of with open command, but this time around, I'm going to be using the file dialog. So that is the reason why I actually got it. That's the reason why I imported it. So let us do that. So I'll just come here and say open file. That's going to be the name. So now I imported the file dialog. So the file dialog has a command called ask open file name. So there you have to specify the types of files you are trying to open up, and then you have to specify the default extension. That is the extension that will be shown in the dialog even though you do not select any extension. So within this my function, I will just create a variable called file, and I'll come here and say file dialog dot ask open file name. Then within this, I'll come here and I'll say file types. I'll open a list. Now within this, so I've done this before actually. I'm just repeating concepts that we have already done. So I want to be able to open a Python file. That's the first file I'm trying to open up, Python file. So the next file that I will be trying to open up is a text file. I don't want to waste too much time. And then the next file I will be opening up will be all file types. So all file types. Now come here and I'll say asterisk dot asterisk. So that's what this represents. And after this, you want to now pass a default extension. You see default extension, you say dot. You just say txt, so it already knows what you are trying to do. Now you now come here and say if file. Now this particular class, it returns a true value. If you have actually selected a file, it returns back true. If you have not selected the file, it returns back false. So it will only evaluate the code within this condition if file returns true. So I'll come here and say with open. So with open, I want to open up my file. To open file, I'll come here. So since I'm trying to open, I'll say R as fx, R as fx. Then, so I want to be able to display the data. So as I open up the content from this file, from whichever file that I'm going to open up, I want to be able to take that content and display it on this my text widget. That is what I'm trying to do. So in order for me to do that, I will just come here and say data is equal to fx.read, fx.read. Now come here. So since this my file is not globally, so is it globally accessible? Let's see. So it is not globally accessible. So I have to make it global from here. So I'll just come here and say global text. So now it's global. Now come here and I'll say text dot insert. I'm going to insert. So I will specify the, I'll come here and say 1.0. Then I'm going to pass the data that I'm trying to insert into it. So I'll come here and say data. I'll say data. So after it inserts into the my text widget, so that's it. So I don't want to clear anything. It's only if I'm trying to delete, that's when I will clear. Okay, so let us test it out and see what we will get. So I will need to call it inside one of these functions. So since I'm looking at opening a file, I'm going to pass the command here in this command option. I'll delete none. And I'll come here and say lambda, and I will say self. So you have to say self since you are still within that class. I'll say self.open file, which is this function I'm trying to call. So let us test it out. So I'll come here, click on file, click on open. So it opens up a file dialog. I'll select a file so that I can display the content here. Okay, so let me look for a file. This file. Let me just check this one out. So you can see that it displays the content on my text widget. So you can even add more things to it. Hello. Yeah. So if the file was not in existence, it will not work. You can decide to even specify other conditions there as well. Okay, so that was the first one. So we're still going to do Control S. I will attach a binding function to this program. Now the next one I want to do is to be able to make sure that it saves when I press Control S and when I click on the save option. So for me to do that, I will just come here under, and I will just create. So I'll just come here and say save file. So in order for me to save my file, I will need to get the data from, as I type anything on my text widget, I want to retrieve that data so that I can assign it to a variable and display it, or rather, sorry, send it to a file. So I'll just come here and say data is equal to, of course, you know that for anything that you want to retrieve from a window screen, whether retrieving it or displaying it there, it needs to be in the string data type. So I'll say text dot get, I'll say 1.0, I'll say tkinter dot end. Okay, so after I've retrieved that, I'll now come here. So I still want to use the same modus operandi. So I'll come here and say file is equal to file dialog dot ask save as file name. Still the same concept. File types, then still the same thing. So I'll just copy it instead of wasting my time typing everything again and again and again. I'll just copy the files, the type of files I want to save as. I like this one, paste it there. And after that, I just put a comma, say default extension, say txt as well. And you can now come here and specify that if really you have typed in the file name and you are trying to save it as a file, that is, you are trying to save it in either of these formats, you want to now call your with open command. You see file. So that file that you selected, you want to now use the W so that you can write the file, say fx. So now you want to now send the data to the file. So in order for you to do that, you can now come here and say fx.write. Fx.write, say data. That's all. After you say fx.write data, you want to now also clear the screen, the text widget or any field on that text widget. You come here and say .delete, then you specify the index. You come here tkinter.end. You can even decide to display a message. So I will just add another message to tell us that we successfully read from the file, and then we successfully deleted. Sorry, we successfully read from the file, and we successfully saved to a file. So I'll just come here. So that one is from message box. So I will come here and say from tkinter import message box. So this is not necessary anyway, it's just for aesthetics. So I'll come here and say message box show info. Just come here successfully read from file. It's not necessary anyway. Then the next one, I just come here and specify it. It's a message box dot show info successfully written. See, file. That is it. This is what will happen when you try to save to a file. It will write the data to the file and tell you that you have successfully done that. So let us now call it in the save option. So I will just come here and say lambda self dot save file. That is that. So before I even proceed, I want to finish this thing once and for all. So I'll create a function that allows me to perform binding, or rather I'll create a binding function so that when I say Control S, it does the same thing as well. It does the same thing. So I'll just come here and say bind save. Bind save. So you either want to do that, I'll just copy the same code. But this time around it will be triggered. So there's no need for us to even do that. You can even use the same function, although there's actually need. So I'll come here and say event, because every time you are trying to attach a binding function, that function needs an event. So you have to specify the event so that the binding function can work. Most especially when it's inside a class. So you need to specify that. Okay. So so I'm calling my class each time I perform that. Since I'm going to attach the okay. So here I will do everything here in this my Windows screen. So I'll just come here and say text dot bind. So text dot bind and open up a quote. I'll just come here and say Control dash S. I'll put a comma. Now just pass the function. So bind save, that's the name. I'll just come here and say self.bind save. That is it. So self.bind save. So it should work this way because it's performing the same operation. So let us test it out. Let's test it out. So let me just type something here. I'll just say Alex. Or I can just say this is code on a mini notepad. I'll just come here, click on file, click on save. You see that it opens up a dialog box for me. So I can just come here, just say mini. So I will save it as a text file so that we can test it to see if it's really there on our system. And I'm saving it on my desktop. I'll just come here and say save. You see that immediately I click on save, it wipes it off and then it shows me this dialog. So that is what I just modified here when I said delete and display the message box. So let's go and check my screen. So what did I call it? I called it mini. So if I should double click this, you will see the code, the text there. This is code on a mini notepad. So that's what we have. So let's test the Control S. Hopefully that should work as well. I'll just come here and see. So I'll have to be on the screen. I'll say Control S. So you see that it works also. So I said Control S and it worked. All right, so that is all. That's all. So let us test the close screen. So when I click on close, it closes window screen. Yeah, so that brings us to the end of this tutorial video. So if you are liking my video or if you like this video, please hit the like button. And if you feel like it will be of an importance to your friend, your family, or people who you know need this video, please share. And if you want to encourage me to make more content like this, please hit that subscribe button. So till we meet again next time, it's goodbye for now.